Welcome back to the studio and welcome to the first episode of our DIY Christmas series. In this episode, we're going to show you how we built this 3-tier tray. This is a great project for organizing around the table for the holidays and can be put together in just a couple of hours. This build features some store-bought lumber as well as an Osborne chair leg that we split into 3 parts and attached using our Osborne screw dowels. Stay tuned for some tips and tricks and we'll be right back. So to get started with this project, let's go ahead and take a look at all of the materials that we're going to be using today. Now this is a very simple project. All we have is a sheet of 2 foot by 4 foot 1/2 inch plywood, as well as a long strip of this 1x2 lumber that we're going to use to make our borders. Now we're going to miter these since we are doing an octagon style. In terms of Osborne products, we have the Highland chair leg, part 6206. This is a 17-inch chair leg. So what we're going to do is split this into 3 parts and use that as the center for our tray. We are also using the 2-inch screw dowels, part 916. I'll leave a link to both of these down below if you want to check that out for your project. So to get started, we're going to cut our main borders for each tray. So let's jump over to our miter saw, take a closer look. Okay, so to cut our miters, there's actually a bit of math involved since we're doing an octagon shape. Now, I'm just going to simplify the cut list a little bit to make it easier. If you would like to follow along with our dimensions, you can reference this cut list here. This will make it just a little bit easier. What we're going to do is just simplify into a more standard size. Now, in order for our border to match our plywood bottom, given the thickness of our material as well as the angles inside of an octagon, we need to set our miter saw to 22.5 degrees for each miter cut. Let's go ahead and cut 8 strips at 6.5. We're going to cut 8 strips at 5 inches. We're going to cut 8 strips at 3.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these, and you can reference the cut list as I'm going through. Okay, so we've got our pieces cut out. Let's go ahead and glue up the border for our bottom tray. Now these strap clamps are really handy for gluing up miters. You can pick one of these up at most hardware stores. I'm just gonna get it around my border. I'm gonna put a little bead on each one and then just kind of spread it in. Make sure we've got good coverage there. All right, now I'm just gonna pull my strap clamp tight. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry. In the meantime, let's take a closer look at our legs. Our leg is 17 inches long, so we're gonna split it into close to even thirds. We're gonna cut at 5.5 inches and then leave a little bit of extra room on the top for our handle. So I'm gonna mark these. So for our jig, all I've done is just cut a center hole using a hole cutting bit in this little scrap piece of wood. That just allows me to slip it over the base of that leg at the tapered end. As you can see, I've marked which sides are square. So I want to make sure that I'm putting those square sides up against my fence of my miter station. I measured out the distance from the center mark on our leg and applied that to this scrap piece of wood. So that puts us at a perfect parallel when I slip that over the base of that leg. Remember, we need to move our miter saw back to 0. And now I can just cut my leg without worrying about any weirdness. Okay, so now we have each section of our leg cut out. Let's jump over to our drill press to drill down the center for our screw bolts. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we're using the 2-inch screw dowel, part 916. So we need to drill a pilot hole since this is a larger screw. Now this could also be done with a regular drill. You can clamp it to your work surface and drill that way, but if you have a drill press, this is a great way to ensure that you're getting a nice straight pilot hole all the way through that leg. So we're gonna start with our bottom. We're gonna insert one of our screw dowels down in there just to get a good grab, finger tight. Then we're gonna take a pair of locking pliers and grab onto the middle part that doesn't have thread. We're just gonna start screwing this down into that leg, making sure we're keeping it as straight as we can. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight because it will straighten up as we add the other pieces. So our tray will sit in that gap there. So we don't need to add one there. All we need to do is add another one into the top of our middle section. Okay, so now that our borders are dry and out of the clamps, we're gonna go ahead and trace these onto our 2x4 sheet of plywood. Now I'm gonna try to limit the amount I have to cut and just to save some material. So I'm gonna bump it all the way up to the edge there. And we're gonna mark all the way around the border. So I'm just gonna cut this line first just to get rid of this excess material here, make it a little easier to work with. Okay, so all I've done here is just cut these pieces into more manageable pieces. So as you can see, I can cut these straight lines with my miter saw set to 0. Now you can also do this with a circular saw and a straight edge. So now that I've cut my straight edges right on the line for that border, all I need to do is take my miter saw and set it to 45 degrees. And I can cut each of those lines at 45 degrees, and that's gonna give me my octagon base for our borders. Okay, so now we have our bottoms as well as our borders cut out and ready to go. Now to assemble these, we're gonna use our pneumatic stapler. Now you could use nails or screws depending on what you have available or what your preferences are. Now I'm gonna figure out the orientation of each piece. Now I want this to be the part that's showing on the inside of my tray, and I want this to be my top edge. We're just gonna place that on that tray there and get it lined up. Okay, so the next step before we add some finish to our project is to go ahead and drill the center holes through each tier. So for our bottom larger tray, we're gonna drill a smaller hole right in the middle. That's gonna allow us just to pass a screw through there into the bottom of that leg. Now for the other two trays, we're gonna drill a hole the same size that we drilled into the leg. That way we can put our screw dowel through each tray. And then that cross point there is the center of our tray. And before we assemble the rest of our project, we're gonna go ahead and add a medium stain to every piece. All right, so the final step for our project is to just go ahead and assemble everything. So I'm just gonna take this second tier and just spin it on there. All right, then we'll take our middle part of our leg and then our top tray. And these are gonna straighten out and level out as you tighten them down onto each tier. And then we'll just make sure that everything is snug down. So that's gonna wrap it up for the first project of our DIY Christmas series. If you're interested in creating a similar 3-tier tray, I'll leave a link below to the products that we use and you can go check that out and get ready to build one for the holidays. Be sure to tune in next week for another easy DIY project for the holidays. Until then, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time.